guys, Tough Dog here. As some of you from Reddit might already know, the reason that I've been kind of MIA for a little while is I shipped my computer to where I'm currently staying through UPS, which I will never do again, and they ended up killing it in transit. So I've been dealing with fighting them on the shipping insurance to get them to pay for the repairs. In the meantime, Tuftcat has graciously Frankensteined his computer so that way I can go ahead and get back to work. With all the balance updates to Andromeda, I figured this would be a great time to redo my Kineticist coverage since she's changed quite a bit. This video is probably going to run a little long because I'm going to go in-depth on all of the talent options and the mechanics, and I'll also be covering all of the questions that I've been asked about the Kineticist in the past. So yeah, let's get into it.
Here we go!
The Kineticist is your biotic goddess of sorts. She's an ultra rare, which makes her rather elusive, but her obnoxious power makes it all the more rewarding when you finally do unlock her. She's built around a passive that's unique to her called Ascension. Ascension gives you a hefty amount of damage resistance, and it removes the cooldowns from your abilities in exchange for them instead consuming shields upon use. There are a few different ways that you can play the Kineticist. You can focus on using pull and throw to smash enemies into one another, or you can focus on just destroying the universe with endless biotic combos if that's your cup of tea. The build I'll be covering pulls in, get it, pulls, because she uses pulls in a little bit of each to kind of capitalize on the best of both worlds for maximum effect. The Kineticist really excels anytime there are lots of enemies with just health left. And with proper gearing and a solid build, shields are pretty much a non-issue. Armored targets can be a little bit more pesky for her, but once we get to the mechanics section of the guide, I'll show you kind of how to deal with all the various types of enemies. For now, let's go ahead and look at the talents. Your first ability is Pull. This is the space magic that you're probably going to be casting most often. If you tap it, you lob a blue snowball into your enemies that lifts them up into the air and leaves them primed for biotic combos. If you instead hold Pull, you yank their ass over to be suspended in the air next to you. You can then use Throw to toss them into other enemies, you can whisper sweet nothings into their ear, or you can just drop their ass off the map. It's totally up to you. Pull has a ton of different applications. Well, two. Pull has two different applications. Anyways, at ranks 2 and 3, we pick up recharge speed and duration. At rank 4, we have to choose between more duration or a radius buff. Radius is a really critical upgrade to the Kineticist. It enables Pull to lift 2 enemies instead of just 1, and it also causes the projectile to become this really fat, forgiving blue biotic blob. It trivializes landing Pull on invisible enemies and enemies that are behind cover, and just really anything. Without the Radius upgrade, Pull can be a little bit finicky, and you'll often find yourself wasting precious shields by recasting it because it didn't take the first time. When you pick up the Radius upgrade, this kind of alleviates any issues Pull would normally have with trying to tag an enemy. Additionally, we specifically don't want duration because it quite literally does nothing for the Kineticist. When you're holding an enemy, there is no duration, and then when you tap Pull to lift an enemy to prime them for a detonation, you're priming them for a detonation. So you're gonna blow their ass up. Like you don't need them to float around forever. If you really wanted to make use of Pull 5A, Crushing Grip, which causes damage per second to enemies affected by Pull, there's sort of some merit to picking up duration here, but I found that style of build just vastly underperformed, and even then, Radius would still let you place that dot on 2 enemies instead of 1, and since you have Ascension, you can just cast Pull as many times as you need, so there really is no situation in which I would pick up duration instead of Radius on the Kineticist. At rank 5, we have to choose between Crushing Grip and Expose. Holy balls, is Expose fantastic. This heavily pumps up the damage we do to that initial target of a detonation by placing that juicy 30% increased damage received debuff on them. This talent option contributes to our ability to comfortably one-hit those red bars with a Pull Lance combo. Crushing Grip, even with the recent buff to it, isn't really viable in my opinion on the Kineticist. Sure, she can spam suspend enemies for days and place that lovely dot on them, but realistically, your teammates are going to pluck those targets off while they're floating around, so you're not really going to actually get that much benefit from trying to just lift everything up on the map. In general, it just really speeds everything up for you to just kind of outright eliminate enemies instead of lifting them up and just waiting for them to die. So this rank is really similar to rank 4, and I just really couldn't find any instances where Crushing Grip was a better option than just the flat 30% damage increase to targets that are affected. At rank 6, we have to choose between Anti-Shields and Biotic Drain. Now, with all of the balance changes, this isn't really as cut and dry as it used to be. If you find yourself often tossing enemies into each other, Biotic Drain is definitely the way to go because it's going to allow you to keep your shields a little bit more cushioned with that ticking heal that you get when you pick up enemies. If you find that you very occasionally toss enemies into one another and tend to leave the big guys to your team while you act like a biotic trash compactor dealing with all the red bars, you don't really benefit much from picking a biotic drain, so in that instance you're definitely going to want to go with anti-shields. Anti-shields lets you deal with enemies like sharpshooters and anointed with a little bit more ease, since you can spend less time putting shots into them to try and strip those shields, and you can just use pull to pull the rest of it off. I think that both of these talents are actually incredibly viable, and it really just boils down to whatever your playstyle is. So again, if you throw enemies into each other constantly, you're going to probably want to go for Biotic Drain. If you tend to focus more on just spamming Biotic Detonations, you're going to want to go for Anti-Shields. With all of that said though, if you pick up Efficient Ascension instead of Devastating down in the passives, you're really going to want to go for Anti-Shields regardless to which playstyle you have. Efficient Ascension is going to give you so much durability and bulk that you're not going to need any other sustain that would come from Biotic Drain, so it kind of ends up just being overkill. Your next ability is going to be Throw. Your main uses for this skill are going to be throwing enemies into each other, throwing enemies off the map, and then staggering enemies when you're trying to build those charges to get back into Ascension anytime you lose it. You don't want to be using Throw as a detonator because it just doesn't perform as well as Lance does damage-wise, especially on those targets that are immovable like shielded and armored targets. Most of Throw's damage comes from when the target collides with the environment, so if you're hitting a target that can't actually be moved to force them to collide with the environment, you're losing out on a lot of potential damage. At ranks 2 and 3, you pick up Recharge Speed and then Damage and Force. At rank 4, you have to choose between more Damage and Force or a Radius boost. Damage and Force gives you significantly more punch when you're making those red bars kiss, a 45% increase in your damage to be exact. This is a significant upgrade when you're using those red bars as projectiles to either deal with other red bars or to deal with those bigger threats like stripping shields or dealing with armored enemies. The additional force provided by this talent is a nice bonus when you're using Pull and Throw to whip enemies into orbit. It tosses them further, thus reducing the risk of them just barely landing on the edge of the map and then hiking back 69 miles to come try and shoot you some more. Radius is an entirely unnecessary upgrade to Throw. While it does cause Throw to become a more comfortable panic stagger skill for dogs, you have Pull. So there's really almost no instance in which you should be using Throw to kind of stagger enemies anyways. So if you use Pull, it's going to accomplish that same that effect of removing them from the fight while also leaving them primed for detonation. There are some instances outside of Ascension where Radius could be a little bit more beneficial, but once you're comfortable with the Kineticist, you'll almost exclusively be in Ascension. So grabbing Radius for those rare circumstances really just kind of penalizes your overall damage potential. Rank 4 is as far as we take Throw. There are several reasons for this, but the main reason is that there really isn't that much incentive to actually pick up the following ranks. At rank 5, you would have to normally pick up either Duration or Recharge Speed. All Duration does is turn Throw into a sort of pseudo-pull. It causes it to become a more stable, reliable primer. Since we have Ascension, we don't actually need to use Throw as a primer because we can just use Pull as much as we want. Again, we have Ascension, so that's why we don't need Recharge Speed either. There's sort of an argument to be made that if you pick up Recharge Speed, it helps you get into Ascension a little bit faster anytime you lose it. But the thing is, with all of the buffs and the balance updates to powers and biotic combos and all that sort of thing, you really actually get into Ascension almost immediately anytime you lose it. So you shouldn't really be banking on trying to do everything you can to make sure you can get into Ascension as fast as possible, and instead you want to maximize your potential while you're in Ascension. At rank 6, you would have to pick up either Double Throw or Swift Detonation. Double Throw is super cute, but outside of that, I really found it to be kind of worthless. It does have some really nice synergy with Pull Radius, in that you can trigger 2 detonations assuming you lift it up to enemies, but Lance tends to provide significantly more consistent damage when you're using it as your frequent detonator. As for Swift Detonation, it's actually currently bugged. Over on the BSN boards, user Petroleum, or something like that, provides the exact mathematical information, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, but the TLDR version is that Swift Detonation doesn't actually boost detonation damage right now. Now this is as of patch 1.08, so if you're watching this in the future, this might have been corrected. Even if BioWare does get around to correcting this bug, I still can't really rationalize wasting the points in rank 5 in order to get that 30% extra combo damage, when instead you can invest all of these points into Lance to make it the more consistent, reliable detonator that it is. A lot of people seem to really go all in on Throw or all in on Lance, but I find that doing that is really kind of overkill on either of those specific abilities, and if you instead split it down the middle and go 4 and 4, you get the best of both worlds. You can still one-hit red bars with the Pull Lance combos, and you can still throw enemies into each other for significant damage, or you can easily check them off the map. It really just gives you a lot more versatility if you kind of split it down the middle for the best of both worlds instead of using one as a dump skill. Your final active ability is Lance. This is going to be your go-to detonator, as well as just an in general great snipe skill. Anytime an enemy is low on health, you can usually just use Lance to finish them off without even having to waste your shields on priming them with a pull. At ranks 2 and 3, we're going to pick up recharge speed and then damage and force. At rank 4, you have to choose between more damage and force or an increased radius. Boosting the damage of our primary detonator is easily the way to go. It's way too good to pass up. Lance is a sort of biotic snipe, so providing it with a nice juicy boost to damage is a really nice boon for the Kineticist. This upgrade allows us to like I said, finish off low health enemies without even having to prime them first. In my opinion, Radius is a really wasted talent on Lance because it's got such a minuscule spread that boosting it by 100% didn't actually accomplish much. Not to mention that picking up the damage and force upgrade makes Lance a much more comfortable ability to spam, and passing on that extra damage potential is really kinda crippling. Same as Throw, we only take Lance to rank 4. If you tend not to use Throw very often and you just don't really care for it, you can get away with leaving it at rank 1 more so than you can get away with leaving Lance at rank 1. So if you decide to instead invest those points into Lance, these are the talent options that I would choose. At rank 5, you would have to pick up either Focus Blast or Anti-Shield. Now, Focus Blast is really just awful because the headshot / weak point registration coding for Lance is just complete garbage. It's extremely inconsistent in whether it determines if you hit an enemy weak point at anything outside of literally point-blank range. In a recent patch, they beefed up the tracking of Lance to make it gravitate more towards center mass of enemies to make it a little bit easier to hit those medium and long-range lances, but in doing so, they removed the ability to hit those weak points at long range because of how it recenters on the target for you. So with that in mind, Anti-Shield is generally your go-to, and it's actually just overall a pretty solid option. It lets you kind of break through that shield gate mechanic a little bit sooner by letting you just lance off the rest of an enemy's shields after a few shots. Now if you're running Pull Anti-Shield, Anti-Shield Lance isn't really going to do anything for you, so that kind of leaves both of these talents up in the air as not really useful. But if you're trying to get to that extra damage at rank 6, then Anti-Shield is going to be your more consistent option. Now if you're maxing out Lance, you're doing it to get to that rank 6 knockdown talent. You don't need shield powered because you have Ascension, and Ascension actually, your abilities cost less than 45% of your shields, so picking up shield powered is really kind of pointless on the Kineticist. Knockdown, on the other hand, does give you a little bit more punch on your Lance, and it also causes it to, knock down nearby enemies. So it lets you stagger nearby enemies when you use it to kind of snipe those low health targets to finish them off. Now again, I don't really advise picking up either of these last two talent rows for Lance because those points are generally better invested in Throw for the consistent performance, but if you do choose to go that route, those are the talent options that I would suggest picking up. Your first passive ability is Biotic Ascension. Ascension is really what makes the Kineticist a Biotic Super Saiyan. As mentioned in the overview, while in Ascension you have a significant amount of damage resistance, and your abilities consume your shields instead of having a cooldown. This allows the Kineticist to really be one of the most aggressive Biotic characters in the game when you play her well. This passive is also kind of the make it or break it of the Kineticist. If your shields are fully stripped, you drop out of Ascension and you have to rebuild it. When you're not in Ascension, the Kineticist is very fragile. So if you find that you're struggling with her, you likely just need to work on your shield awareness and be more conscientious of when you can go hard and when you need to back off. At ranks 1, 2, and 3, you're going to pick up the passive itself, Biotic Damage, and then a reduction in the charges required to enter Ascension. At rank 4, you have to choose between Power Damage or Power Duration. The 25% power damage boost is a really crucial upgrade for the Kineticist. Considering almost all of your damage comes from powers, this is almost an impossible upgrade to pass up. And Duration, as mentioned earlier, is really entirely worthless on the Kineticist. She doesn't really benefit from it in any way, even with the theoretical potential synergy between the crazy long durations and the pull crushing grip combo. It just doesn't actually perform well compared to the damage, speed, and just general efficiency of just outright obliterating everything in your path. At rank 5, you have to choose between either exposure or combo detonation. A massive portion of our damage is going to be coming from combos, so giving a monstrously huge 50% damage boost to them is absolutely insane. This is really going to contribute to our ability to comfortably one-shot those red bar enemies with a pull lance combo. It also provides a huge boost to that AoE splash of damage enacted by the detonation. Overall, picking up the combo detonation talent is a huge power spike for the Kineticist. Exposure isn't at all a bad talent, it's actually incredibly good, but the thing is we can already one-hit red bars when using pull and lance, so all exposure does is boost damage to targets that we're already going to be one-hitting anyways, so it just ends up being a lot of wasted damage potential, whereas if you pick up the combo detonation talent, that kind of disperses that damage potential over an AoE splash, so if there's multiple enemies nearby, you're gonna get a lot more from it. At rank 6, you have to choose between either Devastating or Efficient Ascension. Now, this is genuinely 100% personal preference. With either option, you're going to be able to one-hit red bar enemies with a pull to lance detonation. This choice will not affect your capability to do that. The Devastating does, however, enable you to one-hit those bulkier ammo-primed enemies, whereas you can't with the Efficient Ascension. For example, if you're using the Paw plus Disruptor ammo and you prime an Anointed, if you use Lance while you have Devastating Ascension, that Anointed is going to die as soon as you lance him. If you have Efficient Ascension, you're going to leave him with a little bit of health left. Efficient does, however, make staying in Ascension laughably easy, and getting back into it when you lose it take literally seconds. In my previous guide, I describe Efficient Ascension as the training wheels for Devastating, but that's actually no longer the case. They're both 100% equally viable, it's just a matter of personal taste. Devastating is going to be your more high-risk, high-reward option, and Efficient is going to be your significantly safer with slightly less damage potential option. My personal suggestion is to stick with Efficient for the ease that it provides the playstyle. The 30 extra damage resistance and the 40% less shield cost for abilities just makes you insanely durable. Unless you are really irked by not being able to kind of instantly pop those Anointed and such, I would really stick with the Efficient. It really just goes a long way to kind of smoothing out your gameplay. Barrier is going to be your second passive. This is the skill line that's going to help you kind of maintain your shields during Ascension and ensure that you can stay in Ascension. At ranks 1, 2, and 3, we pick up max shields, faster regeneration, and then melee damage. At rank 4, you have to choose either Unyielding Barrier for more max or Recuperative Barrier for faster regeneration. Like we talked about, if your shields break, you lose Ascension. So because of this, you want to make sure that you have as much fluff room as possible to ensure that you can kind of comfortably take a few hits and still cast abilities without losing Ascension. Boosting your max shields is the way to achieve this extra cushiness. Additionally, you're going to be restoring your own shields repeatedly through the two following talents, so raising your maximum shields gets you a lot more mileage out of those restorative options. At rank 5, you have to choose either Biotic Link or Barrier Drain. Biotic Link actually acts as a soft heal, which is why BioWare recently added that 5-second cooldown to the talent. When you affect an enemy with pull, Biotic Link is going to kick in. What it does is it increases your maximum shields by 40%. When it does this, it provides you the difference. Something to note, Biotic Link only kicks in when you tap pull to lift an enemy. It does not kick in if you hold pull to give an enemy a hug. Anyways, once the lifted target is no longer lifted, whether because you detonated them or because it timed out or whatever, your maximum shields are going to drop back to normal, however you don't lose the shields that you were provided in the transition. So because of this, you're getting a pretty hefty heal on your pull once every 5 seconds. Barrier Drain really isn't a bad talent by any means, but it really just doesn't complement the Kineticist at all. You really don't want to have enemies in melee range because taking a punch to the Biotic Tit really does some hefty damage to your shields, and as we discussed, you want to make sure that you're keeping your shield integrity so you can keep spamming your abilities. So overall, Biotic Link is going to be a consistent heal that you're seeing almost every 5 seconds, whereas Barrier Drain is going to be a very situational, very rare heal. So it tends to be a lot more consistent and work a lot more in your favor if you pick up Biotic Link. At rank 6, you have to pick up either Active Barrier or Saving Barrier. Active Barrier is single-handedly the most important passive talent to complement the Kineticist kit. Every time you kill something with a biotic ability, so all the time, you're going to heal yourself and your allies within 6 meters, but who cares about them, for 10% of your shields. This talent alone turns a casual biotic stroll through the park into a hyperdrive biotic massacre. It enables you to just chain kill after kill after kill. When paired with Efficient Ascension, you can quite literally infinitely detonate enemies as long as you're securing a kill each time. The synergy this talent has with the Kineticist is just borderline broken. Saving Barrier, on the other hand, is substantially lackluster for the Kineticist. It's awesome on every other character, but it really doesn't actually complement her at all. It restores your shields when you hit 20% health, and that's actually just the problem. It kicks in when you drop to 20% health, so it does literally nothing to protect you and help keep you in Ascension, which is what the Kineticist is all about. It's a great get-out-of-jail-free card, but the Kineticist doesn't even remotely need it when the alternative is a spammable heal. When you're leveling up the Kineticist, you first want to focus on getting Biotic Ascension to rank 5 as quick as possible. That's going to get you that combo detonation damage talent, which is going to be a significant power spike for your overall damage output. After that, you want to focus on getting Barrier to rank 6. That's going to give you a massive increase in durability through all the shield recursion that comes from that talent line. Following Barrier, you want to take Pull all the way up to rank 5 so you can get that nice juicy debuff to easily deal with red bars, and then after that you want to put your final points into Biotic Ascension to hit rank 6, and that's going to round out your rank 1 talents and your early on potential. Once you start unlocking those additional cards for the Kineticist and have those extra skill points, you're going to want to take Lance to rank 4 for the beefed up damage, and after that you're going to want to take Pull to rank 6 and then finish out with putting your final points into either Throw, or if you decide to drop Throw entirely, you can put those final points into Lance. Now, leveling is obviously up to personal preference, but that's just kind of what I found to be the most effective. If you find that you're really just struggling early on to survive and keep your Ascension, instead of rushing that rank 5 Biotic Ascension for the combo damage, you could start investing in Barrier a little bit earlier to get that shield recursion sooner. So just kind of tailor it to fit however your playstyle needs. Next up is gear. First we have weapons. Your best in slot, in my opinion, is going to be either the Paw or the Shadow. They're both equally as good. It's just a matter of, do you want to have the scope with a little bit of extra damage, or the not scope? I don't know, I like both. Personally, I prefer the Paw more, but they're both excellent. Following that, other great options are going to be guns like the Hurricane and the Equalizer. These weapons all strip shields extremely easily, and if you decide to pair them up with an ammo power, you can prime for lance detonations incredibly quickly. If you want a weapon to help you deal with armor more so than shields, your best bet is likely going to be the slow-firing cannon-style weapons like the Dawn and the Talon and the Ushior. These weapons complement really well should you be at the point where you have anti-shield on pull, since you have both would-be weaknesses covered. In all honesty though, you can run whatever weapon you want. You're going to be doing most of your damage through abilities, so weapons will play a very, very small role in your total output. The only thing to keep in mind is not to push your weight over the negative recharge threshold. While yeah, you do have Ascension, so you have no cooldowns most of the time, you want to make sure that you don't impede your abilities during the periods where you don't have Ascension up, and where you're trying to build those charges so you can get back into it. Since most of your prowess comes from abilities anyways, there's not even much reason to take multiple weapons or really heavy weapons. So the TLDR version is essentially keep your weapon weight low, and then pick up a gun that's either going to strip shields easily or going to chunk armored enemies quickly. Next up is equipment. You need the Adaptive War Amp. It's going to give you 30% extra biotic power damage. There's no contest here. No other equipment is going to come even close to the increased damage potential provided by that 30% buff to your biotic damage, since almost all of your damage is going to be coming from your abilities. When it comes to boosters, your best in slot is going to be an ammo power. Previously, they were almost required to make the Kineticist really shine. Now, however, they're more of a commodity. They make dealing with threatening enemies a cakewalk, since you can pick up that incendiary ammo to deal with the armored targets or the disruptor to super quickly melt shields, but like I said, they're more of a commodity. You're not going to struggle with these enemies if you don't pick up an ammo power. It just ends up making your life a lot easier if you do. Following an ammo power, your next best option is going to be a maximum shield boost. This will give you more cushion to help keep your Ascension with ease. Contrary to what you might think, you don't actually need a biotic power damage booster. You already one-hit red bars, and the booster doesn't affect the AoE component of a detonation. The only stable benefit you'll receive from it would be when you smush mooks together, or when you're detonating on those beefier targets with ammo primes. So running a biotic damage booster ends up just kind of being wasted overkill. So aside from an ammo power and a maximum shield boost, there's really not much that the Kineticist actually needs or even benefits from. With the build and gearing guide out of the way, a quick word from whatever sponsor YouTube decides to give us, and then on to the mechanics and demonstrations. Unless you use adblock, in which case straight on to the mechanics and demonstrations. The first set of mechanics to really master on the Kineticist revolves around Ascension. Since charges are built up with kills, you need to practice securing the final blows on enemies to quickly pop into Ascension anytime you're without it. If allies keep sniping enemies you throw off the map, or detonating primes before you, just adapt to that kind of inconvenience. Move to a different area, shake up your tactics, try and use Lance to snipe enemies that are low. There are a lot of different ways to kind of deal with teammates who don't really want to let you have those final blows for some reason. As soon as you see that staticky lightning goodness jumping around your back, you know you're good to go. Your abilities consuming shields and the shattering of your shields ending Ascension is what causes the Kineticist to have a bit of a learning curve. There isn't really a cut and dry rule for how to master managing your shields though, it really just kind of boils down to practice. The more you play the Kineticist, the more confident you'll become in when you can go biotic crazy and when you need to be more conservative, but it is a talent to learn nonetheless. If you're running pull anti-shield, it's even more important to recognize your shield's limits. If you spam pull to tear off shields instead of firing a little bit or smashing mooks together first, you'll find that you're actually going to end up shattering your own shields fairly often. Speaking of pull, the next thing that you really need to master is that ability. You're going to be using it as a setup and a crowd control tool. If you lift an enemy to prime him for a detonation, that AoE blast is going to stagger all nearby enemies, which means that's one cluster that's not going to be shooting back at you. Since you can spam your abilities so freely with the Kineticist compared to other characters, it's not as game-breaking if you don't prioritize targets to position detonations wisely, but it will make a difference in how often you lose your shields. Something to keep in mind when using pull anti-shield is that it doesn't prime when finishing an enemy's shields off, so you will have to recast it. This is part of the reason that I don't suggest spamming pull to strip full shields, because it'll take you 2 pulls to strip the shields and then 1 more to prime them for a lance, so that's a lot of wasted shields on your part. If you aren't in Ascension and throws on cooldown, you can use pull and the momentum of a jump to toss enemies off a map. You can also melee while holding an enemy to toss them a short distance for the exact same effect. Holding an enemy with pull doesn't prime them, only tapping it to lift them up into the air primes them. The next thing to work on is your use of throw. Unless you need the arc to hit an enemy that's primed around a corner, you shouldn't be using throw to detonate enemies very often. The tracking for launching targets into other targets with pull and throw is absolutely broken. As long as you have the enemy's health bar kind of soft locked onto your screen, your thrown enemy will just flipper around corners and over cover to smash into his new soulmate. Abuse this, pretend they're magnets, they want to connect with one another, so just go throw crazy. As mentioned, holding pull doesn't prime an enemy, but what you can do is use your gun to prime an enemy if you're running an ammo power, and then while holding that primed enemy, use throw to cause a detonation of your ammo type wherever they land. This is really effective when you're trying to deal with berserkers and fiends. You can use incendiary ammo to fire prime the dogs and then just throw the dogs into the bigger threats, and it'll cause a fire detonation on those targets. You can do the same trick with the barrels that are lying around the map. Pick them up and then abuse the insane tracking system to launch those barrels at your enemies. A great example of this is using the fire canisters to blow up the fiends. If there are no other enemies nearby to smash your held target into, don't be afraid to just throw his ass into a wall or off the map. Doing so causes more damage than if you just release the pull to drop the enemy and then start shooting him. Finally, we have Lance. Lance is your primary murdering tool, so embrace your inner medieval knight and just go Lance crazy. When an enemy is primed with either pull, an ammo power, or by an ally or whatever, Lance is going to be your go-to detonator because of the significant upfront damage that it deals. You can easily use Lance without even priming enemies that are moderately low to finish them off. It's good to make a habit out of finishing off low health stragglers with just a Lance, because this really helps to conserve your shields and protect you from wasting them on what would be overkill. If the low health enemy is near other enemies still, by all means prime and then detonate him, but if he's all alone and weak, just whip a Lance through his chest, put him out of his misery. Alright guys, girls, cats, dogs, and everything in between, thank you so much for watching, and that is all I've got for you guys today. If you enjoyed this guide, leave a like to let me know, and if you have any questions, drop them below, and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Feels like I'm leaving a voicemail message. Thank you for calling. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anyways, if you're new here, consider subscribing to catch my upcoming guides I'll be releasing. And yeah, that's about it. Catch you next time, gorgeous.
Whee!